Hello everyone and welcome to the final Keeping Up with IDS video. How sad that the course is now coming towards the end. Of course, me and Alex are still going to be working all the way up until you hand in your final homework. But yeah, in terms of making the videos, there's this video, there's another one that I'll do later. And we'll probably do a kind of closing, very final goodbye video at the very end once all the work's handed in and the course is kind of wrapping up. But this is the last Keeping Up with IDS video. So first, before we get into things, I just want to highlight right at the top, project deadline is this Friday. Please get your presentations ready. Please tell me if you're going to be presenting live in person or doing pre-recording. The deadline is exactly the same for both, and you will get assessed in exactly the same way in terms of what the marks are available for. In homework 5, if you pre-recorded, there is a question for other students to watch those pre-recordings and assess you. If you come live on the day, you will also get a chance to assess other students' presentations on the day as people are delivering them. So everyone's going to have students assessing them, giving them peer feedback. Everyone's going to have the opportunity to have the instructor team also assessing them as well. And then after that, me and Alex will go in and we'll also look at other aspects of your project too. For more information, you can have a look on the assessments tab and going down to final projects here. If you're interested. And I also, in Lab 08, made it a little bit more clear on what different marks are going to be available to you for the project, so you might want to have a look at that if you didn't attend the lab. Anyway, let's have a look at what we were doing last week for a quick recap, and then we'll have a look at the quiz. So last week, we were having a look at cross-validation, and essentially the kind of theme was just uncertainty. And so cross-validation is useful because say we split our data into our test data and our training data, which we always should to get an accurate representation of how our model is going to work on data that it's never seen before. That's what our test data is. But when we're evaluating, when we're altering our models, we don't necessarily have an accurate representation because we have to split our data into our training and our validation sets when we're kind of messing around with our model, changing hyperparameters, changing and tuning different things and testing how our models work. So what we can do is we can use this cross-validation to kind of combat the fact that the performance that we're going to get out of our model, the way that we're measuring how good our model is going to be dependent on those splits. So we have our training and our validation data that we're messing around with our models here, but our performance on this validation might not necessarily be accurate because we might just, by chance, because we're randomly sampling data in order to put them into this training and validation sets, we might have a validation set that's not necessarily representative of the data. It might have lots of high values, it might have lots of low values. It might be evenly distributed and be a good representation, but you don't know. So a good way of combating this and to see how robust your model is to various splits of the training data is to do this cross-validation where we run it multiple times with different training and different validation sets to make sure that our model is robust and that even when we change the data that it's fitting, that generally it's performing similarly. We then also had Mina walking through an example where you could see all of this in action. And you could play along too with your application exercise 9 as well, which I hope a number of you did. And then we also have quantifying uncertainty and bootstrapping. So another method of trying to combat the uncertainty when we're developing and modeling. And so what we want to do is we want to see how certain are we of our particular estimates, and we can use bootstrapping to help us with that too. So hopefully these methods have helped you develop an idea of how to build more robust models. And yeah, hopefully you'll find that useful in the future. Moving on to our assignments, the homework's now all been handed in. We had our labs and which you should have your feedback on now, which is a bit different to your previous labs, so please do double check them. And your quiz. And this week, obviously, the big dominating thing is going to be the project, which is to be handed in this Friday. And I also want you to do the peer evaluation, which is a peer evaluation of your own team. You'll have got an email about that via a software called Teammates. And this just allows me to make sure that you are only able to assess your other teammates rather than everyone on the course, obviously. So it was quite useful for setting this up. So please use that system and get it handed in. That will count towards part of your marks as outlined on that actual quiz page. So if you follow the quiz page, it should hopefully be clear how that particular part is going to count towards your final grade. We did some readings and the code along's up now, so you can have a look through that. Alex does some modeling and we answer a number of questions about single and multiple predictors and logistic regression and linear regression. So please have a look at that if you are still having some problems with the modeling aspect and want to know more. I also recommend these interactive R tutorials because this week the homework 5 has been released. It's your final homework for the course. Remember, we don't have an exam, so we do have more little bitty assessment things, but homework 5 will be your last assessment. And we do recommend that you follow the interactive tutorials first because it'll introduce the data set and give you a bit of a leg up when you get going. It's not mandatory to do that, but it is recommended. Right, let's have a look at some of your common questions for the quiz. So judging from the feedback, the questions that most of you struggled on were to do with actually writing the code. And I guess that's understandable. Writing code is practice, and so it would have taken you time to go back and to have a look at how you could write these things before actually doing them. So I'm just going to focus on the first few questions where you need to write a little bit of code to be able to answer them. So question 1 is asking us to predict interest rate. So we know that's going to be on the left side of our formula, which is here, because we know this is a formula because it's got this little tilde in here. And with a single predictor indicating whether they've got bankrupt or not. Yes, they'll have a bankruptcy in their history or no otherwise. And so, as always, here's one I have done earlier. I have said that we're going to be making a linear regression. We're going to set our engine as LM. We're going to use LM to do our linear regression. We're then going to fit our data. We're going to have interest rate on the left here because we want to predict it, and we're going to have bankruptcy on the right. And the data is loans, which you can find out by getting a little bit of information here. And then I'm going to use this tidy here, which is going to give us what we need to answer the question, which is the estimates. Now, how did I actually know this is the way to do the code? Well, on week 8, this is lecture 5, I just had a look at, when Mina was demonstrating how to run these models here. And so you can alter this particular bit of code. It's pretty standard how we fit a linear regression and a logistic regression as well. Has a very similar sort of coding structure. So I just had a look at that and changed it a bit to suit the method that we were trying to fit here. Now we've got our code in place. Let's have a look at the question. What is the predicted interest rate for borrowers who do not have a bankruptcy in their history? Choose the closest answer. So we know that we have an intercept here of 12.33. And then if someone has a bankruptcy, then that is going to add 0.73. Okay. But the question is asking us for those who do not have bankruptcy. Now, hopefully you remember when we have a categorical predictor that is, in the case of this case where it's 0 and 1, if it's bankruptcy, yes, that means we times this by 1, effectively meaning it's in the model. But if it's bankruptcy, no, which is the baseline for this particular variable, then we times it by 0. And if we times by 0, that means that this is not in the model at all. So all we need to do now is know, well, this isn't in the model. So really, we just need to pick our intercept, and that is the 12.34. If you want a bit more detail, it might be worth going back and recapping when we were learning in week 8 a bit more, but that's how you get to the answer. So question 2. Let's consider a 3-level categorical variable as the explanatory variable. This variable describes a type of verification, so verified, source verified, not verified. So at first, because the last question you might have thought, oh, I'm going to have to do some modeling here. But no, it's asking us to use the chunk to run any calculations needed to answer the question that follows. What proportion of borrowers do not have their income verified? So here we're looking at, out of the 3 levels, so our categorical variable has these 3 levels, not verified, source verified, and verified. Essentially, what is the proportion? So what we can do is we can use count, and that just counts how many times the different levels pop up. That's giving us this n here. And of course, all we then want to do is to go, okay, well, out of how many values that we actually have, so adding them all together, what is the frequency that they're popping up? So that's what this mutate is doing here. I've just added this new column here I'm titling frequency, where I'm just dividing the number by the sum of these 3. And so here, what is the proportion of borrowers that have income verified? So verified is here. Nope. Do not have their income verified. Sorry, so not verified. So that's here. And we just have a look at this freak here. We can see that it's 0.36 because we're going to round up. And so that was the correct answer. Question 3, let's predict interest rate from verified income. So I'm just going to go up and I'm going to take my code from before and I'm going to paste it down here. And this time I'm going to put in verified income. So according to this model, borrowers with which type of income verification are predicted to get the highest interest? Let's have a look at our estimates. Now you'll notice, as hopefully should not be too much of a surprise, that one of the levels is missing. We have source verified and income verified, and that's because it's using this one as our baseline. So we know that to become verified, it's 1.41 larger, and if it's verified, then it's 3.25 larger than not verified. So I guess from this question, we would just say that it's verified, which is correct because it has the largest increase in the estimate. And the final one I'll just go over is question 4. So here, what I've done is I just copied the code that we created last time, but now I've put a plus bankruptcy because it's asking us to consider only their main effects. So we're not doing an interaction here. An interaction would be if this was times, but instead I'm just going to do a plus. And so we're going to have a look at their main effects, and we're going to see what model we get out when we have both of our predictors in there. And so you can see that we have our estimates here, and all of these questions were based on that. Now, again, we're looking for what is false. So we could walk through each one and double check if they match out. So say, for example, this one, applicants who do not have a bankruptcy. So we don't need to add this because this is bankruptcy yes. And we know that bankruptcy yes is 1 times this, but bankruptcy no will be 0 times this. So 0, get rid of it. And do not have their income verified. So we don't need to add this and we don't need to add this because no verification is the baseline. So that would be a 0 here because it's not source verified, and a 0 here because it's not verified. So 0 times that is 0, 0 times that is 0. We know that this is also a 0 because we've had to times it. So I predict to get an interest rate of 11.02. Well, that's correct because the only thing that's left now is the intercept term. And so that is our first one. Let's have a look at this one. Applicants who have a bankruptcy in the public record. So bankruptcy, yes. And so that's 1 times that. And who do not have their income verified have that. So we just need to add this to that in order to get our average interest rate. So we could do that for the last one as well, but I'll skip it because hopefully you've got the idea. The answer was this one here, because this 3.25 would assume that we're not including the intercept term, which we need to include. So that is why it is the false one, because we wouldn't just have this as the interest rate, we would have to also add our intercept term too. All right, so what do we have this week? This week, your main task should be to submit and push your final project repo by 9 a.m. on Friday. Like the other ones, if you do not push by 9 a.m., I will lock that down. And so you will not be able to submit anything else. And there are no extensions on the presentation. Now, if you need an extension for the write-up, you can apply for one. Late penalties apply. As always, I'll reopen your project so you can do that. And there'll be a late penalty unless you have extensions. If you're struggling to get this in time because of outside factors, then it may be worth having a look into applying for special circumstances. As always, the instructions are in the policies page if you want to examine what those things mean. So here, we have text analysis, comparing text, interactive web app, and machine learning. And these are areas that we're not going to go into super depth on, but we're just giving you a bit of a taster, because each one of these areas, the text analysis, interactive web apps, and machine learning, could become courses in their own right. Especially later on, and we'll talk about this in the last video, there are courses at this university on machine learning and text analysis as well that you may want to take in the future if this has given you an interest into some of these particular areas, but this is just like a taster just to kind of get an idea as to how we do these things. So there are still assignments. We still have our quiz 9, and in fact our quiz 10 will assess you very briefly on this information from here, so you probably still do want to watch them and skim through them. And homework 5 model and review is going to be on all of the other stuff from the previous weeks, specifically week 8, 9, and 10. So you will also want to do that. And I recommend getting started on this pretty quickly because there's quite a lot of questions in this one. You won't be able to do the final question until everyone's handed in their projects because it's about peer marking projects. But if you get the rest of it done this week, then next week all you have to do is the peer evaluation. So none of the readings this week are actually required in order to answer any of the questions. They're just there if you're interested. So if you're interested in text analysis or classification for machine learning, then these are good places to get started, and you may well go off and do some more self-learning and move forward with any of the topics that particularly interest you. We're not doing a code along this week as our code along will be affected by the strike. So what we have done is we have given you access to the one that was done last year. I don't think it was done this week last year. I think it was week 10 last year, where Mina talked about designing slide decks for presentations. No doubt that will be useful. So if you want to watch this a little bit earlier in the week, you might be able to apply some of the things that Mina teaches to your presentation slide deck as well. There's no interactive R tutorials because the R tutorials last week were similar in terms of referencing homework 5, so you probably want to do those if you haven't already. Okay, well, that's the end of our Keeping Up with IDS. As I say, there'll be another video as a wrap-up video that I'll record after this, which is also going to be in week 11, where we talk about, you know, the rest of your degree and what other courses might be useful, some common questions that students ask about moving forward. So I'll address some of those, and we'll probably do a kind of final video from me and the course team once the course has truly finished, because we still have deadlines extending until next week, the homework 5 and other things. So we'll probably do one more there. But as far as the Keeping Up with IDS videos are concerned, this is a wrap. I hope you've enjoyed the course, and I will see you sometime this week. See you later. Bye-bye.